So we had previously implemented the simple authentication, and we had split the pages, and now we made them look nicer. We'd done some input validation, so you can't create a deposit or a spend in the future, as well as the amount must be greater than 0. I want to go back to the SMS stuff. So there are two things. One is, there's also this bug about the account balance, and I fixed that as well. I'll go through what was going on there. But the main thing I want to do is get to the SMS because I want to be able to check the balance easily, which we can already do, but I also want to notify a balance change. But the checking of the balance, I want to be able to be done according to not a hard-coded number that I have in the configuration, but from a phone number that is associated with either the parent or the child. I think I want to do the notify a balance change first because that's a new sort of big chunk of thing, and then use phone number, or actually validate phone number based on parent or child number. And this will become important because although I might not use this feature much, I want to be able to, as a parent, if an SMS comes in from my phone number, I want to be able to do a deposit. Long term, I would like to have a little little phone app that does that. Since I don't want to yet get into writing an iPhone app, even having it do it from the web app is kind of a pain because I got to open up a browser, I got to log in, got to click on the deposit button and enter stuff there. Even if I make it sort of a desk, sort of a phone, like a web app that I can turn into an icon on the phone, it's still a few too many steps. Whereas if I could text deposit and then $25 and have that just work, that is a lot easier for me to deal with. So that's where being able to have a phone number that's specific to the role that the parent or child role will really help. So let's see where we left off in terms of what the application looks like. Let's go here. So I still have some cleanup to do on these buttons. Now that I'm using the Bulma framework, I'm going to basically switch over to that. Okay, so on the deposit money page, the form is now quite a bit nicer than it was looking before. It also now has the validation. So if I try to put in a transaction for tomorrow and I do a deposit, it basically says, nope, date must be on or before today. And so this date is customized in the transaction command validation that we did yesterday. And if I put in -50, we'll get basically error messages for both. So if I fix this and I put this to today and change this to 50 and I deposit, then that now works. And as we saw the other day, if I log out and I log in as kid, then I don't see any of those. I can just see what the current balance is and what the transactions are. So let's look at the couple of things. One was the issue with the account balance wasn't showing up on the deposit form. So let's take a look. And it's currently broken on the spend form. So on the deposit money form, we see the account balance. Don't worry about the formatting. I'll fix that. But on the spend money, did I fix it there too? Well, that's interesting. So the problem was if this was an error, then we lost the balance. And so that works on the deposit form, but it's broken on the spend form. And I haven't finished reformatting the spend page yet. I'll do that later. Welcome back, Alex. Always good to see you. So what I want to do is I want to show you what the fix was. There are a couple of different ways to fix it. Since sort of if you're not up to date on why I'm doing this app, I'm doing this for two reasons. So the first reason is I need this app. I've been tracking my son's sort of virtual bank balance using spreadsheets, and that's really annoying. So I wanted an app that I could access and text message and so on. The other thing, though, is I use this to enhance my Java training courses. So I learn stuff, and therefore how I learn it and the mistakes that I make are things that I will then incorporate into my Java courses. And I'm also working on some online Java courses where this information will be useful. So sometimes I solve a problem in a way that may not be the either best way or maybe overly perfect, or so there are various reasons I'll do things where I might say this is not necessarily how I'd normally do it. So this is one of those cases. So the problem statement here is that when there's an error on this page and we post it, so if we look at the post for the spend command, so let's go to the spend controller, we can see that, right, we do this validation and those errors get handed into this binding result. So if the binding result has errors, then we just return spend. This is, again, the name in Spring MVC. This is just the name of the view, which causes the spend HTML form to be displayed. The problem is that the only thing that's carried forward into the model, right? So the model is what Spring uses and basically Timeleaf uses to populate the form. The only thing that's carried forward is the transaction command. When the form is initially displayed via the get mapping here, we are explicitly adding the attribute balance, right? So there are actually two attributes in the model. There's the balance, which has the account balance, and then the spend command is the DTO object that has the date, amount, and description. So, but if we come into the post mapping and there's an error, we basically redisplay the form, that balance attribute is lost. So there are the two ways you could solve this. One is, instead of having two attributes, right, basically just balance directly and then a spend command object, I could have a page object that represents all the information on that page. And if I do that, then it would become part of the model attribute that gets handed back here, and then basically is always available. And so then it mixes things a little bit, but you could create a page object that has the balance and then the transaction command, and then the transaction command has the date and the amount and stuff like that. So that would be the typical way I would do it, but that's a bit more refactoring than I really want to do right now. So the other way to go is to use model attribute as a method annotation. So here we used it as an annotation for what it's going to pull from the model. So we give it this name, which matches this name up here. And that way Spring knows where to get this object that we're going to use. There are other ways, though, to add attributes to models. We can use this model attribute. So if we go to the deposit controller, we see here that model attribute is used as an annotation for this method, and it takes a name. And so what we can do is anytime any of these mappings are processed, Spring will always basically execute this and drop it into the model. So now I can pull it out from deposit form. So in spend controller, we have two parts. We add the balance, and then we add the command object. It's not really a command object, the command DTO. But here, the deposit form, all it does is populate the deposit command attribute, relying on this method to be called when the page, when any get or post mapping happens on this controller, to automatically populate this balance attribute. So we can see this happen if we put in some breakpoints. And I find, again, I always drop into the debugger when I'm trying to figure out other people's code, like Spring or other frameworks. I rarely do it for my own code because usually I have good test coverage and therefore understand my code. but it's really useful to do that. So let's go, actually, let's do this. So let's stop this and we'll run the debugger. Okay, so let's switch here. Let's go to the home page. We'll log in. We'll log in as parent. We'll go to deposit money. And so the first breakpoint we hit is the get balance, right? Because we're doing a get against the deposit mapping, right? So that's basically this controller is mapped to /deposit. And so the first thing it does is Spring will run any methods that have model attribute in it, and then it will drop it into the model. So we'll let it continue. Now we're in the deposit form. We can see that, so we're going to add more stuff to the model, but if we look inside the model, we see that balance is already there, right? So that way it's always there. We don't have to add it separately. We don't have to worry about it. And I think actually in this case, this is a really good solution. Because one thing we could do, and I've talked about this before in terms of inheritance, I'm always reluctant to do inheritance hierarchies, but it might be useful here to have a base controller that deposit and spend use, since they're both going to do exactly the same thing here. And so that might be useful to have in a base class. And that kind of behavior where it's sort of purely shared, I'm not overriding anything in the base class, I think is an appropriate use. So I might do that. In fact, I might do that right now. So if we let this continue, we will see that now we, okay, so let's look at this again. Deposit money, right? So we hit the balance. We hit the deposit form, and now the deposit form comes up. We can put in something to force an error, and we can see, again, it drops into this get balance model attribute method, and then it drops into here, and there are errors. So when it redirects, there's now in the model, there are two things. There's the deposit command object and the balance attribute. And so then when the page gets displayed, it has the balance available. So since this is shared, or could be shared completely as is, let's actually move it up to a base class. We'll refactor. It's not extract. Oh, actually it's extract superclass. Okay. So we want to extract a superclass, and we want to pull up the get balance method, which requires a count. Now, so in order to get the balance, it needs a reference to a count. So the question is that going to be a problem? Let's take a quick look. That's fine. So our constructor takes a count, and so we can delegate that to the superclass. That's fine. And in fact, yeah, so we can move that up as well and make that protected. So let's do that. Okay, so we'll refactor, where to go, extract, superclass. Now the hard part, what name do I use for this? Well, I've been using transaction command so we'll say transaction controller. So that matches. And so we want to move up the get balance and the account field. That will get pushed up. We'll refactor that. It's been created. No. Okay. So what's really nice about this refactoring is that IntelliJ automatically did a super on the account. It took the field out and now delegated to the super constructor, right? So it's now protected final, does everything there. And so now, so now I have account available in this class. It extends transaction controller. Let's make sure we haven't broken anything by running all the unit tests. I'm not going to run the integration tests right now. And boom, they all pass. Great. So now what we can do is we can go ahead and make spend controller, take this out, make this extend transaction controller, insert super of account, and so now we can take out this balance stuff here, run all the unit tests again, and they all still pass, so that's good. So now if we go to so let's run the app again. So now we should at least see, even though the spend page isn't formatted nicely yet, we'll now see that balance gets reported back when even if we have an error and the page reloads. So let's go here. So we'll go to the spend money. So account balance is there. Let's go to deposit money. Account balance is there. Let's go ahead and deposit some money. Now we'll go spend some money. We want to spend -25. It complains about that. Again, the formatting's not there yet. But now account balance is being displayed here because it inherits that behavior from our transaction controller, and it does exactly what we want. So that's a good solution. All right. That fixes that problem. The other problem that I ran into was if I specified a date in the future, previously it wasn't showing this error message. And that was a little hard to track down until I realized, if you recall, when I was doing the validation, I couldn't put so for the amount, I could just put on that annotation directly on the field, and that works. The problem was I couldn't put an annotation on the string representation of date here because there was no easy way to use any of the date validations. So what I ended up having to do is put the annotation on sort of the converted form of the date. So remember, this date comes in from the browser in a specific format. This converts it to a local date time. So the problem is that the name of the property that actually has a validation error is not date, because this one has no validation. It's actually date as local date time that has the validation. And so the way that was fixed was a little bit annoying. In the form, what I had to do was, even though the input field is date, because that's what we're using, and the field name here is date. Sorry, this is the type. This is the time leaf spring date property, right, or date field. But that's just used for input and display. The one that gets validated is this thing. And so I had to make it so that this was looking at the date as local date time, because now that's actually a property of deposit command, or actually of transaction command. It also made the error styling a bit annoying, because normally I can do, if I want to have it so that, right, not only do I have this error message, but also the border is red. And so that's an error class on the input control. So for amount, that was really straightforward. Basically, the TH field, its amount, and if there's an error, then it tacks on is danger. And so this error class looks at the amount field. So if the field that we're looking for errors on is different from this field, this won't work. And that's what was happening with date, is that this date field was not the one that had validation errors. It was actually date as local time. This is the one that has validation errors. So I had to kind of use this somewhat more clunky TH class append. What it does is if this, it's a ternary operator kind of thing. If this thing is true, or I'm using the ternary operator to basically say, if there are errors on data's local date time, then I'll tack on the isDanger class. Otherwise, I won't tack on anything. So that ends up working. It's a little bit clunky. And what I want to do is have it so that I could convert this to just a raw date, and then, but it still wouldn't work because I want the name of the validation property to match. I might be able to do some things with some annotations to say, hey, the name of this property is date or something like that. But I think the real answer is to create a converter that converts the string date to and from the local date time, but that they're still the same property. And there's a way to do that with Spring MVC, but I'm not going to do that today. We have the page looks good. We have our error messages. We have our account balance. We can cancel out, and it returns to the home page. Okay, so that's pretty much it for just catching up on some cleanup. So let's go to our Trello page. So I think we can consider, I mean, other than just, some cleanup that I know I need to do, the main functionality of input validation, I will consider done. Cool. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is notify a balance change via SMS. I think I want to do that second. So what I want to do is I want to associate a phone number with the parent and child separately, and so I still have I have working SMS code, so we can go to and look at our SMS controller, which is in our SMS adapter package. And so remember that Twilio will basically do a webhook. In other words, it's going to do a post to this path /SMS. Actually, that'll be /API//SMS. And this is something I generally do is I put my API stuff on a different path that I don't get confusion between the web HTML server-side generated stuff and the REST-like APIs. So this webhook basically will take a form that Twilio will drop in on us. We'll get the command text, which would be something like the word balance. And then it authorizes it. And if it's coming from a known phone number, it will actually do the thing. Currently, the only thing we understand is balance, which will just return the balance. If it's an unknown number, we log it and we just return nothing. So what we want to do is really, it's the phone number authorizer that we need to change. So we want this phone number authorizer to respect to basically figure out who the phone number is coming from, and then associate that with sort of roles or properties. Now, that's going to be interesting. Eventually, I'd like to hook it up with sort of user account kind of stuff, but initially, I actually don't have to. Let's see, I ran all of the tests. All the tests pass. So let's go ahead and commit. And episode 18. I guess I'll push that. Maybe I'm going to postpone this for a bit and do the notify balance change, because this will require a new adapter, and I think I want to do that instead. So let's go ahead and do that. So what that'll require is not a phone number authorizer, but basically phone numbers to notify that there's a balance change. So let's think about this. What we want to do is we want to have it so that whenever account has either a spend or a deposit made to it, we want to notify. So I want to open up my ports and adapters. We want to have it notify something. Now, I could code something directly into account. So let's go look at account. I haven't looked at account in a long time. So let's look at account. So here we've got bunch of things. It takes a transaction repository. Oh, so this is interesting. So there are 3 ways that the account balance will change. There's a spend, a deposit. There's also, let's not forget, the interest credit. So given those 3 ways, I could sort of stick in code where in each one of these it does a notification. But as you see, these all, these all call this add new transaction. So I could do something from add new transaction, but I'm wondering, so I could do that here. I could have some way to notify some collaborating class from the add new transaction. The other option is have transaction repository whenever a save gets called, which by definition will be for a new transaction, because we never delete transactions. That's going to be sort of an overriding concern, is that we never delete transactions. We may create what are called compensating transactions. That might, that's one of those, might be overkill for this type of application, but it's very useful to figure out what happened, right? Oh, this, $500 should have been $50. So you basically reverse the 500 and then you add back the correct $50 transaction. So I think what I'll stick at sort of more the domain level at this point. The idea is somewhere in here, notify those who care that the balance changed. So the thing is if there are multiple transactions that happen. So for example, if I do a deposit and check the balance, and I haven't checked the balance for a while, remember that we create these catch-up interest credits. So we might get multiple texts in a row that's saying, oh, look, your account balance changed. Oh, look, your account balance changed. You might get several triggered by the interest credits. And then the one that was triggered by either a deposit or a spend. So I guess the question is do I want to bother with interest credit transactions? Right now, I'm thinking no. So I think right now, I'm only interested in deposit and spend changes. So this wouldn't go here. We would basically, right, so in our deposit and our spend method, we would somehow notify others that something changed. Now, from an architectural design standpoint, there are 2 ways we can go here. One way is we can create a service that is the notifier, and then from deposit we call service balance changed and say here's how it changed, right? Positive or negative with the current balance. The other is we sort of just broadcast a message, basically an event, and let whoever cares about that event do what it wants. That is sometimes referred to as event sourcing, although that has certain specific connotations, but in general, that's an event-driven way of thinking about it. There's a little more complexity there because then I have to have, well, where do these messages go? How does one listen to them? And I think that's right now unneeded complexity, partially because that's just unneeded flexibility right now. And I'm all about Yagni. I might want to put that in later, sort of for more, teaching, a learning point of view. But right now, I think I just want to have a collaborator. So my collaborator, the idea is that, have some collaborator notify balance changed or basically just balance changed with, now I could send in directly the amount and then the balance. But since this, even though we're not going to event-driven, this is still event-like. And so I would want to have these two pieces of information encapsulated in an object where I can tack on a date. Well, you know what? Again, that's sort of flexibility I don't need. I think I'm going to go with something pretty much like this. The amount, and for spend, it would be basically negative amount because we spent that much, and the current balance would be updated. We'd actually have to do this at the end to make sure it actually takes into account the transaction that we just did. So this is kind of what it's going to look like, which means we need a collaborator that has a balance change method. And so I don't have a good name for that just yet, but let's delete that. And let's think about the test that we want. So what do we want to happen? So let's go ahead and write a balance changed or balance change notification test. And so in our test, we would have deposit should cause notification of balance change. So something like that. And here is where there's two ways we could test this. Those two ways, so referring back to my test doubles, I've tried to be really precise about the kinds of test doubles that I use, right? Dummy stubs, fakes, spies, mocks, etc. Remember that what our goal is basically deposit money, right? So given an account, when we deposit money, then we expect the notification to be sent. And so the question is how do we verify that a notification is to be sent? Right, so this will be an SMS or something like Twilio, but from a test standpoint, we obviously don't want to go through Twilio to test this. There's no real state that has changed, right? Because it's basically this collaborator thing, whatever thing we're going to use, basically it's just going to delegate and forward it to send it through to Twilio, and there's not going to be really any state to check. So most of these things, the fake, the stub, and a dummy, and assertions are used for testing state changes. But we really want to see, was a notification called, right? So we were talking about that collaborator balance change is what it might look like. So we want to basically verify that balance change was called with the correct amount and the correct current balance. And so if we do that, then we know that it worked properly. We can create what's called a spy, and basically a spy version of the collaborator thing, the notification. Got to think of a name for that thing. I mean, I guess balance change notification service. Why not? So the idea is that we want to somehow assert that the balance change notification service, that it's what do we call it? We said it was going to be that the balance change event was called with the correct parameters. We could use a mocking framework to do this, right? We could create a mock we can have an interface and we can create a mock of it and then affirm that that method was called. In other ways, we can actually write our own mock. We don't have to use a mocking framework. we can use a mock where we then ask it to verify and it sees if this method was called. I think I'll go with the mocking framework just because that's a little bit more common, but I do want to show the other way to go. All right, so let's set this up. We given an account, so we've got account, new, and what we need a fake repository here. And then var, store it in a variable. So we'll deposit. So we'll bring in our test clock support. So local date time at midnight of, no, actually we can just use now because we don't really care about the date. So we'll say now, and what else do we need? We need the amount. Let's say it's $25. And remember, this is scaled int, so it's actually, that's $25. The source is from our test. Okay, so we deposited money. Then we expect the notification to be sent. So we're, in addition to having account be dependent on the fake transaction repository, we're also going to need it to be dependent on our balance change notification service. So let's go ahead. This is going to be a bit tricky because I'm trying to avoid adding another required parameter to this constructor because then I have to change a whole bunch of tests. Let's come back to that and let's create the interface for this balance change notification service. So let's go ahead and create, so we want balance changed notification notifier. I always hesitate to use the word service as part of the thing that is a service. So let's do that. This is not a class though, this will be an interface. And the method that we wanted was basically this balance changed. So it's going to be a void because right now I don't think we're going to return anything. And then int amount and int balance. Since this is in our domain, this deals with amount and balance as an int. And we're going to want to change that to big decimal at some point fairly soon. But I have a thing for that because I wasn't sure if I wanted to use big decimal or the Java money stuff. So for now, we're thinking in our domain, we deal with money as ints. When the balance change notifier wants to send that out through Twilio's SMS, we'll convert it to a string anyway, because we have to convert it to the Twilio XML format. So, but this is a domain thing. And so this deals with amounts at the domain level. Okay, so we've got our interface. Now we can look at our constructors. So what we'll want is, and we have enough constructors where we might want to be going to use a builder pattern, but I don't want to go there just yet. That'll be a refactoring that we'll do. So this will be another constructor that all we want to pass in is the transaction repository. Yes, I know that constructor already exists. That's basically this one. But we also want to add in a balance change notifier instance. And so it'll call this for transaction repository. And then we will assign the balance change notifier. And we need a field for that. Eventually, we're going to want that auto-wired, but I don't want to set that up yet. We'll make this not final. we'll have to assign a default for the balance change notifier so that our code will work. But right now we're not using that yet. We're just setting up the this is for testing. And so this one will go away, as I mentioned, because at runtime in the production system, we will have an @service annotated class that Spring will inject into this. But for right now, we don't want to have that. We just want to get our test. So here, and now we need a notifier. So we'll create a local variable. Okay, so I just call mock in the class name. So mock, and the class name is balance change notifier class. So that's our mock. Okay. So we'll put that up here, give it an account when we deposit money. Okay, so now what we want is we want to verify that the balance changed method on this mock got called. So we can do mock notifier, what is it? Oh, it's just verify. So verify. So I want to verify that balance changed. That the amount of 2,500, and that leaves the current balance as 2,500. So this verify will basically say, so some method with arguments. It was only called once. Okay, so we created a mock notifier. We expect our account, when we do a deposit of this amount, that it will call balance change. We're verifying that balance change was called with these parameters. This should fail, right? Because we have not done anything to account other than taken it as a constructor to call our balance notifier. So let's go ahead and run this test. And it failed as appropriate, right? There were 0 interactions with this mock. Good. So that means our test failed. It failed for the right reason. So remember, there is 2 things that's important when you're doing TDD, right? The red-green refactor. So the red part is that the test needs to fail. But in addition, it needs to fail for an expected reason. So we expected this to fail because there was no interaction. It never called anything on the balance change notifier. So that's cool. So now we want to go into account. And in our deposit method, we want to call the balance change notifier that the balance changed with this amount and with the current balance. So now if we run the test, this should pass. And it does. Awesome. So now we'll go back here. We'll create a test for the withdraw or the spend. So spend should cause notification of balance change. And so here, we could move this stuff to a setup method. I'm not going to do that just yet. So we have our mock balance change notifier. Notice that we just have an interface here. We haven't written anything yet. We're basically making sure that the interactions work. And then we can go and implement it and just test the balance change notifier by itself. And then all we have to do is make sure they work well together. We don't have to do a lot of combinatorial testing of both things. We test each component and then a little bit to test that the glue worked. So given an account, when we spend money, I don't want the account to go negative. So can I install something in the fake? I'm just concerned that if I do a withdraw, that that's going to might cause a problem once we require an account to never go negative. What I can do is I can pull this transaction repository out, and then I can do a save of a specific transaction. Let's do that. So we'll create a transaction. It's now the amount, we'll put in $100 and initialize. Okay. So now we have an account with $100. And if we now spend, if we spend 25, then we should be good. And so now we can verify that the mock notifier balance change was called with, let's use a different amount. Let's say it was $35.35. So 35.35, and now I got to figure out 100 minus 35.35, 64.65. One thing I forgot is we can actually use underscores as part of these numeric literals. And so that way it's easier to read that these are sort of dollars and cents. Okay, so this test should fail because we haven't hooked it up to the spend notification. Awesome. Right, basically no interactions, it was never called. So now we can go into account. We can actually, I think we're comparing the wrong thing. We actually want, even though we spent 35, we want this to be negative, right? So that from the point of view of the change event, it's basically how much the amount was increased or reduced, and then the current balance after that. So let's do that. You know what? I'm going to leave that as broken because I want it to fail for a different reason. So here we do balance change notifier, balance changed, negative amount, and the current balance. So now if we run this test, it'll fail in a different way because the amounts don't match up. And good, it failed for the correct reason. So now we can fix our test. And then we can run both tests here. Awesome. Okay. So we have now hooked up the collaborators. Now we want to create one that actually talks to Twilio. So let's go ahead and do that. Thanks to the folks at Twilio who gave me some credits to play around with. And they also gave me a coupon code. If you haven't used Twilio yet and you sign up with this coupon code, which is basically JitterTed, you'll get 20 bucks of credits to play around with. So again, thanks to the folks at Twilio for doing that. All right, so we want to create, we now have we've mocked it out, so we know the things, the account is calling it at the correct time. Now we want to go and create an implementation. So we'll implement this interface, and no, it will not be balance change notifier impl. It will be Twilio balance change notifier. Because one of the things we can also do, I haven't played around with the voice stuff yet, but it could make a call and say, hey, your balance has changed, and that might be fun to do. So we'll say Twilio SMS balance change notifier. And we'll implement that method. Now, this does not go in the domain. We'll put this in the SMS adapter. But this might even deserve to go into its own adapter, because maybe we want, so sort of these two are living together in this adapter, right? And so going to our, right, so we're looking at this kind of thing, right, where we've got the internal port, right? So this is our balance change notifier interface, And now we're going to plug in an implementation of that interface, which is the external notification. Currently, that's sitting with another adapter that's dealing with SMS, the incoming stuff. This is outgoing only. I could put it in a separate adapter package, but I'll leave it here for now. Okay. What we want to do here is basically send text message with balance change info. That's what we want to do here. And this is going to be a service, and this will be injected into our account at runtime. So let's go and figure out what we need to do with Twilio to send a text message. So I'm going to be using the Twilio Java helper library, which I've already used for the webhook. Oh, yes, Nutty Buddy, this is all Java, Java, with a little bit of HTML, CSS, but mainly backend Java stuff. Welcome. So I've already imported this stuff. What I want to do is I want to be able to send a message. So turned out receiving a message was really easy because all I had to do was set up basically a post mapping endpoint that Twilio will call in. Sending a message is a bit harder because I've got to authenticate myself, not me, but the code. And so that's going to require me to use the account SID and the auth token. But otherwise, this is pretty much the code that I want. The key part is this Twilio init, which I would assume I would do in the constructor of my notifier. And then message would be the thing that gets created. And my assumption is just calling create here actually sends the message. I guess we can try it. Okay, so let us grab this part. So we'll create private final string account SID. I already have a config class for this, right? What's the incoming request? Yeah, so I've got a Twilio config class, so I'll just use that. That will get created and passed in the constructor. And what then I want to do is I want to do twilio.init. So twilio.init. It says username password. I'm assuming that's just yes, dword. So previously I've implemented it where if you text into, basically if you use your phone to send a text saying balance, it will respond with a balance. Now what I'm doing is sort of the other way around, where if a deposit was made to the account, it will text my phone with, hey, the account balance just changed, and give me that information. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. So init says account SID and auth token. So hey, advice to Twilio folks, match the parameter names with what you're expecting, because this says username password. Really, I don't know why you don't say account SID and auth token, because that's actually what I'm passing in. So parameters are documentation too, folks. So this is going to be Twilio config account SID and Twilio config auth token. Those are in my config file, my private config file, my private config file that's in my local directory on my machine. It will be something that when I deploy this to Heroku, I will put as an environment variable, so that way I never have authentication tokens or anything like that in the GitHub repository. Yeah, dword, consistent naming, like be consistent. Absolutely. The IDE seems great. Yeah, so this is IntelliJ IDEA, the community edition, actually. So this is the free version. You can either use the community edition is great. The ultimate edition, which you can get for free, as D-Word said, you can get IntelliJ for free, has some really nice stuff for Spring. When I do teaching like this, I actually stick with the community edition so that I know that other people who use it won't be disappointed when they can't use certain features. But yeah, I do a lot of Java teaching, and I find when they're using Eclipse, it just seems so clunky. Yeah, let me know if you have any problems getting IntelliJ, especially getting IntelliJ for free. You can get all their tools for free. So if you use other languages, they have they're all based on this core tool. And if you want to learn more about IntelliJ, I'm working on a course on how to use IntelliJ better. But hopefully you're picking up some of that just by watching me here. Okay, so we have initialized this. That's true. Although D-Word, the Spring features in the Ultimate Edition are really, really nice. Is it worth it if you have to pay for it? Maybe. It's certainly worth a trial. But it's not just Java EE. There is some nicer stuff that the Ultimate Edition has if you're doing Spring development, which we are doing here. Yes, I love JetBrains. I've been using their stuff for 20 years. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that my account SID and my auth token are correct. So hold on, gotta switch to secret because you can't see my SID or token. So one interesting thing that's really useful is you can set up a Spring Boot, a .Spring Boot devtools.properties file. Basically, this is a properties file that is in your home directory, and this will override anything else in terms of external configuration. And so this is really handy for kind of this use case where I don't want my Twilio IDs, my keys and stuff. I don't want those even in like a dev properties file that's in my GitHub repository. I don't want that in my project at all. So by putting it here, as long as I don't cat it on the screen in front of you, it's private, it's kept on my machine, so it's always available, but I don't have to worry about it accidentally getting included anywhere. I could also set environment variables, but this is handy because it then is specific to Spring Boot and applies when I'm running it locally. Okay, so it's there, the properties are set. Let's now switch back to IntelliJ. Okay, so we're hopefully initialized. Then in our send text message, what do we need to do? So we need to basically do something like this. So here's another pet peeve of mine. A lot of times folks, when they're writing technical documentation, try to put too much into their examples or make it so that it's not clear. Like, what are these two phone numbers? Is one of the sender and the receiver? Am I sending to two different phone numbers? I have no idea. Let's go and find out. So message, creator. Okay, so I guess there's a whole bunch of different ones I can use. The way I would have written the example is phone number. Which one is it? Let's actually do this import. So we make sure we import the right thing, not that one. Also phone number. Okay, so phone number, this is from, and we'll have phone number 2, and then creator will take, so I guess the 2, messaging service. So I can specify the phone number that it's coming from. I assume that has to match the one that's in my account. Or I can use the messaging service SID. So let's say I did that one. And then the body of the message, which will be balance changed. Yes, I'm totally hacking this together. Balance changed by and this is going to be scale decimals. Format as money amount. Let's put this in a string. Body. And so this would be new phone number. I'll put in a fake one for now. I'll replace that with the real one later. I'm not sure if I want to use this because I think I can use the SID. And that way, so in Twilio, when you allocate a phone number, so one of the things you have to do is have a phone number available. So when you allocate a phone number, you can assign a message service ID to it, which I think is great because, right, it's basically an abstraction over the number. So if the number changes or you have multiple numbers, I guess, the SID will remain the same. Let me see what my message SID is. I think I know what it is, but let me take a quick look. All right, I guess I'm going to use the phone number because that's actually no easier. I was hoping I could use my friendly name, but actually it's an SID. Turns out, and I can't show this to you, but if you create your own account and you look at the active numbers, there is an SID as a property for the phone number, but the documentation talks about messaging service SID. And so I'm not sure what that means. I'm assuming it's this SID here that I can't show you, but I have no idea what that means. Okay. All right. So it looks like I'll just use the phone number because that's the easiest way to go. So this will be to from. This will come from the Twilio config, which I will have to add get phone number. So let's go there. Let's go to the Twilio config and add that in. So we'll need a private string for phone number. Should really just use Lombok to generate these getters and setters, but I'll do that later. Getter and setter for phone number. Okay. What? Oh, right. That's a string. I need to wrap that with a phone number. Oops. This to phone number I'll fill in, but it's going to be literally my phone number. So, oh, actually I can forward to my Google voice number. That'll be fun. That I could care less if you see. All right, so actually I'll put that in a second. So, okay, so message creator basically creates a message creator to execute create. Boy, Twilio doc folks, I have some ideas for you. This is not terribly useful. All right, so let's go and so basically creator, it takes two phone numbers and the body, and then we call .create on it. Okay, so two phone numbers in the body, we call create. Oh, it looks like we need a REST client. Do we need a REST client? What does it use? Execute a request using the default. Okay, so we don't actually have to create a new REST client. There's docs on how to do that. I guess if we wanted to go through a proxy or something, that would be useful. I guess we don't need to do that. This returns an executed message. Not sure what T is, but okay. So this message was a sent message. So the to number, the from number, the text of the message, it returns a message creator capable of executing the create. Create is a funny word here, but whatever. Okay, so let me tack on a logger here. Info, Twilio, message sent. So one thing is when you're logging, be really careful about what you're logging. I don't want to just do a toString on this message because it might have various IDs or keys or whatever. So I want to be very clear about what I'm sending here. So I actually only want the message. What do I want? I can get the SID. What is that? Return. Okay, so this is a unique identifier for the message. That is not proprietary or anything. I'm not worried about that. And it tells me that it got sent. I assume there's error handling. What else can I find? I can find status. What does status return? Status gives us the status of the message. Oh, so helpful. Oh, really? 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 That's like an auto-generated doc. What is the status? What is a message status? Tell me what it is. Fine, I will just tack it on. I have some. Yeah, SQLite is really useful, D-word. Since a lot of the training stuff that I do tends to require people to learn how to use bigger databases, I'm actually using Postgres because it's really easy. It's free. And it uses all the stuff that I already know how to do. But SQLite is on my list to look at. I agree, it's very useful. Okay. Okay, so we have, I think this is an implementation of using Twilio to send an SMS message. The two things I need to do are I need to add the phone number, the from phone number into my config. So let me go to my config, which is just phone number. Hold on, secret time. I need to go and add that to my phone number. And I'm going to just hard code. Whoops. Let's go to the notifier. This phone number eventually will come from some list of users to notify. And I realize that's not quite what I was originally thinking. I thought that would be easier or different. So right now I'll hard code it. So let's take a step back and look at our architecture for a second. So we have our SMS balance change notifier that's using Twilio to create and send a message. We have a test that makes sure that when we do a deposit or a spend, it causes the balance notifier to be called. Now what we want is account to have this balance change notifier injected. So we want to tack that on to the auto-wired one. So this is going to be a bit tricky because I want to auto-wire the balance change notifier. But for test purposes, I want to keep around the one without it. Well, I'm going to need to change all these other constructors to be something else. So for my auto-wired one, it's going to take the transaction repository that we have configured, which is the one that's talking to the database. And then balance change notifier is going to be the one that we just wrote because it's the only one that's actually marked as service. We have no other implementations. Then this goes away. In my tests, I want to basically have a no-op balance change notifier because for my unit test, that's basically just not important. I'm just wondering if I should change all those tests. How many tests is that? Oh, it's 10 usages. Yeah, all right, let's do that. So let's get rid of this. Just going to be consistent here. Oops. And then the last thing is this dot. Okay. Now I am going to have tests that fail to compile. So what I want to do first is in my tests directory, I want to create, I want a fake or a dummy? So it's pretty much like a stub. It basically won't do anything. So what I'm trying to do is, in some of my tests, I create an account with just the transaction repository. For those tests, I actually don't care what this thing is. In fact, I don't really want it to do anything. So I want to create a test-only implementation. So let's do that. Let's go and create a stub balance change notifier. And it'll implement the balance change notifier, and it'll basically do nothing. This is in our tests. This is only going to be used for tests. So now we have this thing that we can use. So now if we go back to account, and if we go through the refactoring process, so let me delete that. So everything should compile right now. Those are okay because I'm explicitly passing in the notifier. So if we go back to here, and now I use the, come on, yeah. So I want to add a parameter here. The type is going to be a balance change notifier, not balance change notifier, balance change notifier. The default value, what this means is everywhere that, it used to just call a new account with the transaction repository. Well, now it'll now automatically add this in. And we basically want a new stub balance change notifier. Let's preview this. That looks like it didn't do anything. Hold on. So just want to double check. These are all tests. And so balance change notifier, balance change notifier. The default value is a new stub. Oh, it's probably not seeing this because the stub notifier is only in the test section. So let's just say stub. Okay. Let's preview that. Let's do the refactor. Now we'll see stuff breaks. So this is, actually, I wonder, yeah, okay. So this is new. So let's copy this. I think I could have done this better, but we're there. Okay. Probably getting to the point where if I start adding more collaborators to account, I'm hoping I won't need many more. I'm going to have want a different way to use these in the tests because this kind of refactoring is a bit annoying. All right. So everything should compile now. Good. Let me run all my unit tests. Whoa, null pointer exception. I wonder if those are places where account. Oh, right. Okay, so these are ones These are ones where I was passing in a fixed clock and some other stuff. So here's where a design pattern, either builder or even prototype, which I've been tweeting about recently, might actually be appropriate, because I now don't have a constructor where I can pass in both a fixed clock and a balance change notifier. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is, and this is temporary, I don't like it, is create a stub right in here. This is kind of awful, but I right now don't have a good way. Oh, and I can do a lambda. Oh, that's kind of neat. I keep forgetting that. So I've been doing Java for so long, I forget that lambdas are kind of useful. So what this lambda is basically saying is this interface, the balance change notifier interface, has a single method that takes two parameters. And so we want to basically take those two parameters and then just do nothing. Okay, so now let's run the test again. They should pass. I don't like having this default here because that seems just wrong. That's interesting. So these tests are failing. That's interesting. Let's look at why these are failing. So we create an account. I wonder if the constructors are now kind of a little messed up. So this constructor takes a clock, which calls this constructor that takes a clock and an interest strategy. Not surprising that this test failed. So it looks like the interest strategy isn't being used correctly. And it's the ones that take an account and a clock. So it takes the repository, takes the clock, and creates a new monthly interest strategy with that clock. And then calls this constructor. But this stuff didn't change. So this test is failing because it was if we go back to this test, this is expecting interest to be credited, but it looks like interest is not being credited. Right? We created a fixed clock. We have a fake transaction repository. We deposit on December 1st. We deposit on January 15th. When we request the balance, we expect two transactions, right? So we're filtering out, so we're only getting the interest credit transactions. So we expect two. We expect one to be 21 cents because that's based on this this $100 initial deposit, right? So $100, we expect a 21-cent one. Then when the balance is $300.21, we expect a 63 cent. So it looks like interest isn't being credited properly. It must have been something we did because this stuff worked before. What if is it an isolation problem? Let's just run this individual test. Okay, so this is failing. So it's expecting, it did not expect this November 1st transaction. Why is that unexpected? Oh, it's in there twice. Why is it in there twice? Yeah, so I wonder if this is having a side effect. So let's go here. Let's run all the interest credit ones. Yeah, I think there's a side effect problem there. Yeah. Because what's happening is when it does this deposit, we're asking for the balance before we get a chance to add this interest credit. Yikes. Under normal circumstances, this wouldn't be a problem, but that's a pretty awful side effect. I think what I want is I want to, when I notify, I don't want to call the balance method because that has the side effect of crediting interest as needed, which is a little dangerous. I don't think this is a great solution. I'll have to think about this a bit more, but let's refactor this into internal balance. I hate this kind of thing because it means there's something wrong, and there is something wrong with some of the assumptions of the test, but I think I'll just go with it. So internal balance just sums it up, and since it's internal, we will make this private. And so now here, instead of calling balance, which has a side effect, and I think it's only for tests that it's a problem. Okay, so now these should now all pass. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to think about that more, but all right. So let me run all the tests again. Okay, they are all running. Great. Let's now. I have my config stuff set up. We have the Twilio balance notifier configured as a service. So let's run the application. Okay. So let's see what happens if we go here, log in as the parent. Let me clear out this window. We'll deposit $35. Deposit money. Uh-oh. It didn't like my phone number. What did I do wrong? Oh, my auth token was wrong. Okay. Let's restart. Let's now spend some money. And we'll spend $10 on stuff. Okay, well, it didn't like my authenticate. I wonder if I was using, I must have been, because my SID is wrong. Okay. It must have been, I was using a test SID and a test token. And so I changed the auth token to be my token, but I didn't change the SID to be my SID. All right. If all else fails, check both things. That was interesting. We're already logged in as parent. So let's go ahead and deposit $25. It's a gift. The date's correct. Deposit money. Okay, well, no exceptions. And I guess I will have to see, what does the log say? So Twilio message was sent with status empty. Thank you very much. That's not helpful. But we got some status messages. So we were authenticated. It created the message and sent it. Now the question is did it actually get sent to my phone number? So let me go check. Well, I don't see the message there. I wonder if it didn't like sending it to my Google Voice. I don't see why it should care. Let me go look at my usage, my logs. Okay, well, it shows that the message was delivered. So that was sort of successful. All right, well, I'm going to have it sent to my real number and just make sure that y'all don't see it. So let me change the phone number in here to be my phone number because I think it got hung up. No pun intended, hung up somewhere between Twilio claims it sent it, and I believe it. Google seems to be having problems forwarding my messages sometimes, so let's go spend some money. Spend $10 on stuff. Oh, actually, we restarted it, so let's go deposit money. Deposit $25. It's a gift. I don't like the fact that it's synchronous, so that's something I'll probably work on next time, is to make the sending of the text message synchronous, because there's some communication that has to happen. I don't need to wait for it to return. What I'll want to do is basically just put it, say, go execute it, and then have the page return, because this web page is not dependent on it getting sent. Okay, so it claims it got sent, and if we look at the log, it does say it was sent. There it is. I think what happened was I had my do not disturb on, so that way I wouldn't get text messages while I'm broadcasting. So basically, here's my message. I don't think you can see. I think you can see part of it. But basically, Kid Bank Twilio, because I identified the name of the service, balance changed by $25. Cool. Okay. So a few hiccups there. I'm not sure what happened with using my Google number, but when I switched to using my real number, it sent out the text message. So if we look at the implementation, basically, this init part just had to make sure my SID and my token were correct. And then in my balance changed, which I can show you. Hold on a second. Not quite the message I was wanting to send. So basically it said balance changed by, and I forgot to finish this message, which was going to be, and current balance is, and then scale decimals, format as money with the balance. So the idea is it was changed by this amount, and the current balance is this amount. So sending the message with a little bit of better docs, I could have done that more quickly, but now we basically wrote a fake one that our tests use, but at runtime, Spring, because this is marked with a service, will inject the Twilio SMS one. And so now really what's left to do is not hard code this number anymore. This phone number and the config stuff comes from Twilio. When I deploy this to Heroku, I'll put those in environment variables, so those are kept secret. And then this phone number of where the text message gets sent to, we'll be able to configure once we set up accounts for who should know about this. And that's going to be a much bigger change. And I think the next, because I'm way over time today, the next thing we're going to do is, so we've basically done notify balance change via SMS. Woohoo! The next part is, I think we're going to have to now take the jump of creating a concept of something like a real account, or account or profile or something like that. So we can keep track of this thing, keeps track of its balance, and notifies those who are interested, those who are sort of owners or participants in this account, and we'll need to create some domain objects for that, and that will start expanding our domain. But that's it for today. We got the text message. The text message got sent after we fixed a couple of things. Again, thanks to Twilio for providing some credit for me. And again, Twilio coupon code is JitterTed. And if you've never used Twilio before, that'll give you $20 in credit, which is what, several hundred, if not more text messages because each one is like 0.75 cents. Anyway, so lots of text messages for you to play with. Once I get the account stuff all straightened out with parent and child and who should get notified, we'll start processing commands that are more than just balance, and might play with actually doing a phone call. So basically calling out saying, hey, your balance is whatever. That's it. Thanks for joining me today. All right. Have a good one.